Hello, my name is Clay. Thank you for joining me this week to talk about the readings of Week 5 on feedbacks and thresholds. I will be using the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico and population regulation as examples of positive and negative feedback loops. Firstly, let's recap on what we have touched on last week regarding complex adaptive systems and how it relates to feedback loops. Complex adaptive systems are linked to ecological and human social systems. They do not exist in isolation. Panicky is a hierarchical set of adaptive cycles at different scales in the social ecological system and their cross-scale effects. The concept of panicky captures the way living systems both persist and innovate at the same time. Panicky is about systems adapting but maintaining their identity. Thresholds result in a change of state. Panicky, as we previously learned about, is completely different to threshold changes. When disturbances are great, complex adaptive systems are transformed completely. The system may change catastrophically, and as functions and structures of the system collapses, the system changes into a new state. Ecological and human social systems can transform from a healthy to a distressed condition or unhealthy condition to a healthy ecosystem. Regime shifts can occur because of external perturbations, but they also occur due to complex interactions within the system that operate across a myriad of scales. Put simply, feedbacks are loops between a set of variables or attractors within the system. Feedback is the effect that changes in one part of an ecosystem or social system has on the very same part after passing through a chain of effects in other parts of the system. It is important to study feedback loops so we can manage systems. Every ecosystem and human social system has numerous positive and negative feedback loops. Both kinds of feedback are essential for survival. Negative feedback provides stability. It keeps important parts of the system within the limits required for proper functioning. I'm going to use the dead zone in the waters of the Gulf of Mexico as an example of a positive feedback loop. The dead zone posed a grave new threat to the region's environment and to its local economy. The extremely low dissolved oxygen concentrations in the bottom waters of this region represented a condition called hypoxia. Research at the dead zone identified three unlikely culprits: synthetic ammonia, modern-day farm practices, and a global nitrogen cycle thrown out of balance. Concerns about the Gulf's ecosystem and fishery have centered on hypoxia, but the reason for these dangerously low levels of oxygen was abnormally high levels of nitrogen, which originated in the Mississippi River. The enhanced nitrogen input to the Gulf has boosted the growth of phytoplankton, which ordinarily is limited by nitrogen scarcity. As more phytoplankton flourish at the surface, more of their waste products and more dead phytoplankton drift to the bottom, providing food for organisms that decompose them. The result is a population explosion of bacteria. These decomposers consume enough oxygen to cause oxygen concentrations in bottom waters to plummet, suffocating shrimp and fish that live at the bottom and giving rise to the dead zone. Because the fresh water from the river remains naturally stratified in a layer at the surface that mixes only slowly with the salty ocean water, oxygenated surface water does not make its way down to the bottom dwelling life that needs it. Systems receive inputs of energy, matter, and other information, and process the inputs and produce outputs. The Gulf of Mexico receives inputs of fresh water, dissolved oxygen, nutrients, and pollutants from the Mississippi and other rivers. When shrimpers harvest shrimp from the Gulf, its system is providing an output of matter and food energy. Positive feedback does not only happen in plant and animal populations, it is also common in human social systems. Mutual stimulation of friendly or antagonistic relations between individuals or groups is an example of positive feedback. Positive feedback loops have a destabilizing effect on systems and push them towards extremes. I'm going to use populations as an example of a negative feedback loop. We understand that negative feedback is a circular chain of effects that opposes change. It keeps things the same. When part of the system changes too much from what it should be, other parts of the system change in a way that reverses the change in the first part. The function of negative feedback is to keep parts of the system within limits that are necessary for survival. Negative feedback is a source of stability. Negative feedback generates stability by keeping significant parts of the system within the limits needed for healthy functioning. Negative feedback organizes and maintains the system around a particular state of attractors. Negative feedback loops are crucial for keeping populations in check. Populations cannot keep growing indefinitely, as one or more factors will limit the number of organisms to a level known as carrying capacity. A negative feedback loop arises when population growth slows down as food supply, for example, becomes exhausted or unavailable, or if predator numbers increase. A population can sometimes increase so rapidly that it overshoots carrying capacity before negative feedback arrests the growth and brings population size to below carrying capacity once again. Take a forest with no deer, for example. As a male and female deer enter the forest, they reproduce. Over time, the deer population continues to grow. Deer require an adequate source of food to grow and produce offspring. However, in this situation there is not as much food as before, because the larger numbers of deer are consuming more. The deer are less healthy, more susceptible to disease, and sometimes die at a young age because they do not have enough resources. This example tells us that population regulation uses negative feedback to keep plant and animal populations within the limits of the carrying capacity of their environment. Carrying capacity is the population that the food supply and the environment will support on a long-term sustainable basis. Because the resource that sustains populations are limited, no population can exceed the carrying capacity. With the negative feedback loop, an increase in the population reduces the food supply. Less food supply means more deaths and fewer births. If the population is larger than carrying capacity, deaths are greater than births, and the population decreases until it reaches carrying capacity. Once the population is close to carrying capacity, births are more or less equal to deaths, and the population does not change much. Today we have looked at positive and negative feedback loops. The development and growth of all biological systems, from cells and individual organisms to ecosystems and social systems, is based on the interplay of positive and negative feedback loops. Ecosystems function best when they have an appropriate balance between the forces that promote change and the forces that provide stability. Thank you.